The National Taxpayers Union cares about that. So does its Executive Vice President, Brandon Arnold, who joins us now. Brandon, welcome back to Salem News Channel. Good to see you.
Thanks, Kevin.
What is the temperature of the House agenda right now, and are they on a path to convince the voters in another 6 or 7 months that they deserve another shot at leadership?
Well, I think that's a big question, and it's hard to know right now because there's so much opaqueness when it comes to this budget deal. Now, Speaker Johnson was at the White House today negotiating with the president, and he really needs to deliver to the taxpayers right now. He really needs a package that cuts spending, that includes provisions to defund portions of Bidenomics, because that is what they have been talking about for months and months now, and we need to see some results. I'm a fan of Speaker Johnson's. I do think we can score some wins here, but once that bill is released, which could be any minute now, we're really going to get a chance to dive in and see what he was able to negotiate with the president.
Well, he talked about in his acceptance speech when he was elected speaker that he wanted to dissect the spending, stop the omnibus action, and turn back into several appropriations processes. I think it was up to 12 that he was referring to. But does the current situation that he has faced, and I know he's taken criticism from some of the voices on our network. Charlie Kirk has been very outspoken about what he hasn't done. Can he do anything in the current equation that he has, given the Matt Gaetz faction, given the Steve Scalise faction? I mean, the different personalities that kind of drive the caucuses are something that he's more or less enslaved to. And here's a big secret: Kevin McCarthy had the same problem. Like this is not something new. Do you find compromise where you can and live to fight another day, or do you get canned and they say, to heck with you, let's try the next guy?
Well, the problem is there's so many red lines that have been drawn amongst the Republican conference right now. You see them, some people saying we don't want any continuing resolution, we'll never support one. Some say we can't spend an additional dollar on Ukraine, we don't want any of that money. Some saying we have to spend more on defense. Anything that holds the line of defense or cuts a nickel of defense spending, we're going to object to. So once you have all these red lines out there, it's really, really tough to thread the needle. We do need to see more compromise within the Republican conference. We need to have some degree of unity because it's really hard for the speaker to negotiate any kind of good deal for taxpayers if he goes into the president's office and the president knows that the speaker can't deliver Republican votes. So if we had that degree of unity, which is lacking thus far, you can put that blame on the speaker's shoulders, or you can blame the various caucuses and factions that you mentioned before. But until we have that level of unity, it's always going to be an uphill battle to get a good deal.
See, that's the problem, and that's why I had an issue with Gaetz's gang going after McCarthy the way they did, because they should be having that fight behind closed doors and emerge with a game plan that addresses the concerns, but says we have to be pragmatic in the interim. If you don't have leadership, if you don't have the power to set the agenda, then you can't get anything done. And we saw that for the first 2 years, but we haven't done a lot with it since we've had it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier to be an arsonist, to burn things down, than it is to build things back up. And if you want to take down the Speaker of the House of Representatives, which they successfully did, you better have a plan B in place. We kind of stumbled and bumbled our way to Speaker Johnson. I think we landed on a good speaker. Like I said,
I think we did too. I like him, actually.
So yeah, but until you line up and you say, okay, this is our new guy, until you line up behind him and you start to put your faith in him to negotiate, you got to give him a chance to succeed. If you're not going to line up behind him, especially given the razor thin majority that has only gotten tighter over the past couple of weeks, if you're not going to line up behind him and put your faith in him to negotiate a good deal, then you can't really blame him for stumbling and not succeeding. So we do need Republican unity out there. I know it's a tough thing because it means that certain legislators with big egos, I'm not pointing my fingers at anyone, but there's legislators out there with big egos, have to sometimes realize that we're going to get a half a loaf here. We're going to get 3/4 of a loaf because we are dealing with a Democratic president and a Democratic Senate.
Yeah, well, I guess that's what I'm here for, is to point the fingers. What does, in your opinion, what has to happen during the primary process for the House and Senate race Uh, because again, ideally, it would be take leadership in both houses and work with a president, i.e., Trump, who will have an America First agenda and say we're going to do things the right way. Kind of come hell or high water. But you got to have cooperation in the legislative side to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, I think the majority, having such a thin majority in the House has been a bigger obstacle than we ever could have anticipated because you have some people that are such hardliners on certain issues. So it's been a disaster. And the speaker, both speakers, both McCarthy and Johnson, have too often had to rely on Democrats in order to get bills done. And that should really send a message to the folks that have been so recalcitrant. If you are passing bills with Democratic support on a regular basis, maybe it's time to reconsider that strategy because they are not pulling bills to the right. They continue to pull legislation to the left. And that is probably going to be the case with the spending package here. We have a real good chance to defund portions of Bidenomics, to go after the Federal Trade Commission, which has launched an assault on capitalism as we know it, to go after the Department of Labor, that is basically a side arm of the labor unions right now,
Right.
the IRS. You name it. We can start getting in and defunding portions of these agencies' activities, but we can't do so if we're relying on Democratic votes to pass spending bills because they're not going to tolerate it.
That's really well said. Brandon Arnold of the National Taxpayers Union, thank you for spending some of Decision 24 Michigan primary night with us. We appreciate it.